If you are into dark tales, oh my gosh, I get scared when I read books that are, they're just really, really dark. I'm really excited to interview today's guest, Christie Stratos. She's an award-winning writer who holds a degree in English literature. She's also the author of the psychological suspense novels Anatomy of a Darkened Heart and Brotherhood of Secrets, the first two in her Dark Victoriana collection. She's a poet, a short story writer, and she's been published in anthologies, literary journals, and magazine. Christie, I'm excited to have you here today on Women Action Takers to talk about your journey. Like, how did you get into this? And most importantly, what are the books about and why should we get them? But Dark Tales, oh my gosh. I remember, I don't know if you ever saw this movie, but a book called Amityville Horror. Have you ever heard of that one?
Oh, yes. That's
Oh,
serious horror stuff.
yeah. Well, it's funny. I was interviewing somebody a couple weeks ago, and their genre is thrillers, and I was telling this story about how I read the book Amityville Horror, and it was just such a page turner, right? And I got to the end of it, and then the movie came out with this gentleman named James Brolin, and my husband and I bought the movie on Betamax, like it was even before VHS. So
Yeah.
we would watch the movie, and then I watched the movie maybe a couple months later. I probably watched the movie a good 20 times. It's such a good thriller. One day when I came
Wow.
home, I walked in the door and I heard the music from the movie, and
Mhm.
I went into this like crazy tizzy, and I was like, turn it off, turn it off. I can't hear that music. It's driving me crazy. So something just snapped inside of me, right? So I'm just
That's
curious,
funny.
like these dark tales that you write, how did you get into those? Because I myself, I got to stay away from that stuff now because I'm too scared. So how'd you get into that?
I totally understand where you're coming from, and I actually had a similar experience with the movie The Ring. I don't know if you've seen did you watch that one?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
It was too
Yes.
scary. It was so scary, but I loved it. I used to watch a lot of horror films, and I overdid it. It was, like, similar to what you're saying, where I watched it too many times, and at some point, it was just too much, and I started having years' worth of nightmares. How crazy is that? Years of nightmare it was something like 7 years of nightmares, about this ring girl because I overdid it so much. So I don't watch too much straight horror anymore. I would call my books, they're psychological suspense. They're dark, as you said, definitely dark. So here's Anatomy of a Darkened Heart. And here is Brotherhood of Secrets. And you can read them out of order. They don't have to be in any particular order. They're standalone. So if one sounds good and the other one is not up your alley, you can still enjoy them both, one or the other. As you said, they're from the Dark Victoriana Collection, and I call it that because they can be read as standalones, all taking place in the Victorian era. And I really enjoy dark stuff, even if it's not horror. Some people have referred to anatomy as psychological horror, for example. So it's all about the psychology and what's going on in the characters' minds and how they're affecting each other and deliberately hurting each other and things like that. So the first one deals more with that in terms of family. And then the second one deals more with that in terms of cult type behavior. And the second one will have a follow up book that I've been working on for a while. And that'll focus on one of the characters. So, anyway, if you are interested in psychological horror that revolves around a family, this is the book for you. Psychological suspense. And then if you are interested in anything having to do with cult like behavior, this one is the Victorian era, but it focuses on a locksmith shop. And this man who owns the locksmith shop is hiring a very specific type of employee, and they are all alone in the world, single men who are really desperate for any kind of sense of family or friendship. And there's a reason for that. And as we dig deeper into the man who owns the locksmith shop, we start to find out what his whole purpose is. And by the end, a lot of people are like, wow, that was really okay. I get him now. It's cult type stuff, but not like straight up cult. So, you know, I really enjoy that stuff. I really enjoy psychology and the darkness that we harbor inside ourselves sometimes, and that can
Mm.
only get worse if we don't deal with it, you know, really get to the root of what's going on inside. And sometimes we need a lot of help, and sometimes the wrong person comes along and can take advantage of that. So, you know, I explore that in both books. Yeah, I think a lot of us have had that. I do think of these books as relatable, regardless of the fact that they're in the Victorian era. So that's what these books are about. And if you're into that kind of thing, then I think you'll really eat these up.
That is so interesting. So what I gotta go to the cult part because
Yeah.
that is a very specific genre and very specific, you know, type of material. And so did you yourself experience any type of cult environments or cultish like type of behaviors that got you interested in that, or why did you steer that way? Because it's very specific.
I did not. I was never in a cult, thank God. But I am very interested in and have witnessed much of, as I'm sure most of us have, pretty masterful manipulation. So, you know, when you go through that or when you witness it, I have to say, you know, when you're in it, obviously it's awful. It's a horrible thing to have to suffer through. As I said, you know, if you're out there and you're going through that, you are not alone, far from alone, gaslighting and things like that. But I, you know, taking a step back from actually experiencing it, when you watch movies about that kind of thing, when you read books, when you read biographies about people who have experienced that kind of abuse, it is just amazing what one person can do to another and convince another person about their own selves. So, you know, I was not aiming for a cult type thing. I was more aiming for the manipulation, and the way it ended up as more of a cult type feel. So like these types of things just sort of feed into themselves. Like I said, the first one more has to do with family, and you know that's a whole other type of darkness, and the other one is desperation for family. So again, a different kind of psychology, but similar, you know. And I do focus a lot on in both of these books and in my short stories, which are called The Wrong House and also The Artist, all part of the Dark Victoriana collection. There, you'll notice that there's a deliberate claustrophobic feel. And of course, that plays brilliantly into a cult where you are all just kind of stuck together and can't get apart. Some of the people want that, some other people aren't so sure. Same kind of thing when you're in an abusive family situation. You know, there is that claustrophobic feel. How do I get out of this? And yet you kind of can't, you know? So I have that. And then in The Wrong House and The Artist, we also have a claustrophobic feel. It's kind of like a hallmark of my works, I would say. And it contributes to a lot of different psychological issues. The Artist and The Wrong House are quite different. And The Wrong House actually features a historical figure who you've probably never heard of, Dr. C.L. Blood. Nobody's heard of him. So, you know, I dig a little bit into him as well. And really different kinds of psychological issues in all of my books and short stories.
Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Oh my gosh, I'm just thinking about this. I have a couple friends that I know of, you know, because there might be
Mhm.
others that I just don't know of, who were raised in cults and got out, you know,
Mhm.
one at a much later age in her like early 50s, the other one in her like late 30s. And also, you know, in one of the books that I've put together, anthology called Invisible No More, Invincible Forevermore, one of the women in that story, Amy J. Morrison, tells the story about gaslighting. You know, like we put a
Mm.
spotlight on the gaslighter, and like, how do you know that you're being gaslighted? Because you mentioned that when you're in this kind of situation that, you know, you kind of feel it, but there's this kind of resistance to
Mhm.
believing that we allowed this to happen. I think that that's oftentimes what happens. Like, how did I allow this to happen? It can't be true. It can't be really
Yeah.
happening. You know, I myself joined not knowingly joined a business cult. So there's all
Oh.
kinds of cult behaviors out there that are really
Mhm.
doing what they can to manipulate, like you said, you know, manipulation, right? That's really what you're going for here. So it's interesting. Like, how did you choose these topics? Because I hear you talk about, you know, the closed in, right, and the claustrophobia, the
Mhm.
manipulation, all these dark, dark things. Have these ever had an effect on your own life, you know, in the dark area? Because, you know, there's people who write fantasies, who write, you know, love stories and those types of things that are more along the lines of the the positive feel. And then we have these dark things that aren't. But I want to hear your perspective on it, because what can we take away from reading a dark novel, like reading one of your novels, that will be maybe enlightening? Like, if we can look at the positive side of it, is there a positive side of it?
There is, yes, there absolutely is. Well, you can totally read my books just for the darkness or just for the psychology or anything like that. At the same time, one of the things that I really wanted to do, especially particularly with the novels, really, was so that if anybody were to read them, with anatomy, if you are going through abuse within your family, I wanted people like that who might read this to feel less alone, and to also encourage them. And I'll explain this. Let me get through it. Encourage them to leave, to get out if you are in that kind of a situation. Now, I'm not saying that's easy by any means, but the damage done over time increases exponentially. And so, I wanted to kind of show with anatomy what that can look like. And so, in a way, in a dark way, kind of support people who might be going through that, who read this and say, wow, this is me. Actually, I see this. I understand that. And I have had that feedback from people saying, I saw myself in this book. This happened to me, kind of stuff. And for those who are still stuck in it, maybe to make them consider, maybe I should try to find a way, whether it's through a therapist or some kind of other help, to be able to escape that. You have a lot of life to live and you have a lot to give, even if people around you are telling you otherwise. And the more it goes on, the worse the impact is. So, kind of encouraging people, this can get worse, even if you think it can't. And with my other book, similar type of thing. You may feel alone in the world. That doesn't mean you should accept anybody as a friend, a leader, a mother or father figure, or anything like that. It should still be someone, if you need someone like that, still choosing someone who has a positive impact on you, who can help you and guide you the right way. Many people are led sort of astray when they need help by the wrong type of person who's just grabbing on and sucking you dry, pretty much, if you know what I'm saying. And so I kind of wanted to encourage people to, through Brotherhood of Secrets, kind of look at their connections. And if you're feeling taken advantage of, if you're feeling like these people, that you're friends with, or that you consider leadership figure like that, are draining you, are bad for you, are a bad influence, you feel negative around them, to look a little bit closer and deeper and sort of see, what's actually going on here. If I separate myself from the situation, what is going on, So that's what I would say is the positive aspect of my novels. And I was hopeful that people who are going through it would see it. Other people who don't go through it are just reading a book.
I love that. And so at the end of your novels, is there like the light at the end of the tunnel, or how do you oh, it's the opposite? Oh gosh, let's hear about it.
It's like I said, I'm kind of encouraging them, like, this can get worse. Get out. Get out before this happens to you, type of stuff. So it's kind of like the opposite. I personally love dark tales. I love dark endings. I like unconventional endings. I like unpredictability. So all of those things are in these books. And like I said, if you're just reading to read, you're going to enjoy them for that purpose. And if you are someone going through one of these things and you're reading, you might get the idea that, like, okay, I need to really think about where I am right now and really consider where this is going. I don't want to end up like Abigail, my main character. I don't want that to happen to me. So it's kind of an opposite approach.
Oh, very interesting. Well, I want to say hi to Mikey Adam Cohen, who is tuning in right now. Thank you so much, Mikey, for being here, and share this out. Yeah, it's interesting because my whole, I'm not sure what word to use, but my whole thing is all about positivity. And so to talk to somebody who's, like, you don't pull them out of it into the brightness, it's like, it's kind of interesting for me to hear that, because I don't read stuff like that, because I think it's because I was in so much darkness. The first, I was in a very volatile, abusive, alcoholic household, my first, 18 years of life. And my mom was with my dad for 55 years. And it was, like you said, she didn't know how to get out. She just didn't know how. Like, she could have gotten out, but she didn't know how. And she didn't have the right people in her life that could help her lift out of that. And for me, it's like I spent so many years working on myself. These last 7 years have been like a tremendous life change for me, moving into the lightness and seeing all the good in the world and stuff. So it's interesting, like these dark tales that you don't pull them out of that darkness, and you like to, and I love how you stick to your guns, right? And this is what I'm doing, and this is how I want to, write my novels and stuff. So do you write any other sorts of genres, or is this like your thing?
Believe it or not, I am a very positive person in real life, which is like some people say I don't really match what I'm writing. But I used to write a lot of positivity haikus. I've written positive poetry that's been accepted into journals and things like that. I love writing poetry that is always more positive, focused on beauty. Only every once in a while is it something darker, but typically I do something lighter for that. But I will write whatever inspires me. So at the moment, I'm writing most actively historical fantasy, and that is a lot of fun. So it's dark because there's dark stuff in it. It is not as dark as the Dark Victoriana Collection, and it's a lot of fun, and I enjoy that. I enjoy that kind of stuff. One of the things I was trying to accomplish with the Dark Victoriana Collection, these two books, is when I was younger, these are not young adult by any means, but I used to read a lot of, young adult when I was a young adult. And I always found it very unrelatable. Now, they didn't have the same kind of stuff as they do now. But at the time, everything ended up great for everyone. And something was great about everything they did, or they were special in some way. And I was just like, this doesn't feel like reality. And then, I would read some books that were dark with these really positive endings. And sometimes it was great. And sometimes it was incongruous to the rest of the story. And I would sort of be like, but that's not how it works. So that's what I was trying to achieve here in having those dark endings and all the other things that I said. But with the historical fantasy, I'm really just having a great time. We're in the Victorian era, but it's much more fun. There's a lot more lightness to it. There are those moments that are on the darker side, but not the same. Like we find out that one of the characters is illiterate. That's not that dark, but it's just a negative point that they're going to work on fixing. And there are other things like that where we're finding out each person's background. The piece that I'm talking about, by the way, is called Grimoire Society of Dark Acts, and you can get it on Kindle Vella or on my Patreon, which I know Linda linked below, so thank you for that. And it's episodical. It's on an episode series. So I'm on episode 10 now, and the next one to come out will be 11. And so, part of the darkness is I'm bringing in historical figures, the Harp Brothers, and they are America's first serial killers who nobody knows about. Nobody has heard of them, and yet they were notorious at the time. This is back in the 1700s, so that's some of the darkness, but again, like with a much lighter feel. Some of these characters are just fun and silly, and they have great banter and stuff like that. So it's definitely lighter and just enjoyable in that way. So yes, I do write other things. I have written, for journals and anthologies, and those are usually a little bit lighter as well.
Well, I want to talk about the research aspect, because it's not just dark tales, right? There are dark tales, but you have done a lot of research, it sounds like, on the various aspects, whether it be psychological or historical. But before we go there, I wanted to ask, when you were growing up, there was a series that you mentioned that I have never heard of, that you read when you were a younger adult. But when you were growing up, did you also like the dark type of tales? And if so, what did your parents think?
Well, I was always a big reader, and it was in elementary school. I just can't remember what grade that we were first introduced to Edgar Allan Poe, which seems a little inappropriate now, but that's when I was introduced to it. So, I loved it. I was probably too young for it. I don't know why they introduced us to it so young, but I really loved it. I was totally fascinated and drawn in. And then later in, I think, high school, when I read Hamlet for the first time, you can read that as Shakespeare, you can read it as a dark tale about a guy who's, really, really trying to figure out what on earth happened to his father and get revenge for it. As just a darker tale. And I really enjoyed the psychology behind it specifically. I found myself really loving that. And Julius Caesar, like there are dark aspects to all of, these Shakespeare histories and dramas and things like that. And I really loved it. So, it wasn't always that I was reading straight up like really dark stuff. But I would read that kind of stuff and take dark things from it. So I always kind of was in that mindset, I guess, and have always appreciated it. And like I said, I've been an avid reader. So, and then, watching movies, like I said, I used to watch a lot of horror, and I loved when they would really put in some great psychological aspect. Some of the best horror, in my opinion, is Japanese horror. And if you love horror, check out Japanese horror. Thailand has some really good stuff. Korean, all of that is so scary, and in my opinion even scarier than American, because it doesn't rely on just visuals and jump scares and stuff like that. It is heavily psychological and really creepy stuff. So I just started like really enjoying it, and I couldn't even tell you why, but clearly it impacted my future writing to a pretty big degree, appreciating all that stuff.
You're like, the creepier the better. The
Yeah.
creepier the better. Yeah. Well, Mikey, thanks. Mikey says, great question. And Greg, hey, Greg says, love your setup, Linda. Awesome. Yeah, I like this one here where we have the different colors. These are my branding colors on the bottom there, and then having both of our websites. I decided, I was going to like mix up my stuff a little bit here and there.
That's good.
Well, so thank you. Well, it's interesting because, with, there's so much going on, and these things have been going on for forever, in life, as far as like kids and, the things that we learn, the things that we read, and what do we take from it. And then, there's bullying, and there's all these different things that play into life that have been happening for a long, long time. It's just more of a spotlight on it now, I believe, because of the internet and our ability to be able to share information more readily. And then I think it probably exacerbates it as well. And so, thinking about that, like your parents just wondering, like you said, the like Edgar Allan Poe, maybe reading that a little bit too young, and but that stuff inspiring you. And then also, like you mentioned about the Shakespeare and how you can read it as a story, or you can read the dark tale of it. And so it's really interesting how we pull out what works for us. And for you, it was the dark tales, and then helping you to move into this, genre of writing dark tales. So, so I want to hear about the research. You have pieces that you're working on, history from the 1700s. You have these psychological thrillers, psychological aspects to your writing as well. And you are an English, like you have an English degree. You don't have a psychology degree, right? But you pull into the psychology. And so how did you how do you know what to research, and how did you get started researching, and how do you know when to stop? Because researching can like really take you down the rabbit hole big time, right? Yeah. Like when I go into Facebook, I'm like, I'm going to get on there for 3 minutes. Next thing we know is 3 hours. So how do you know when to stop researching and just like, okay, I just got to stop now and just write?
It can be hard, like you said, and especially when you love it, you start just really digging deeper and deeper, and sometimes you don't want to stop at all. And then if you don't, you just keep going on and on. But, it all benefits you in one way or another when you're writing. So, typically what I do is I start writing. I'll have a general idea. I actually don't start with exact ideas. I don't plot. I'm a pantser. And for those who might not know what that means, it just means that I write by the seat of my pants. Whatever comes to me is what I write. So my characters guide me very heavily in my books are all, and my short stories are all really character driven. So I start writing these characters that come to me in one way or another. It's usually something visual in my mind, and I'm like, okay, I let it sit there for a little while, and when I can't take it anymore, I start writing it down. It kind of builds up, and I start writing. And I see kind of like where it goes. And as I go along, I see the research I need to do. So of course, for my first book, I had to do a lot more research. I knew a certain amount of stuff about the Victorian era because, my mom and I we used to go to a lot of auctions together, and they would have all kinds of Victorian stuff. And she would tell me lots about it because she knew a lot more about it. She would tell me about like all the kinds of like cameos and the mourning jewelry and things like that. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing. It's really fascinating. There's a lot to work with here, you know? And so when I started writing, when I started writing this rather, I already had a good idea of the Victorian era, and then I started digging deeper. And yes, some of the research goes unused for sure. When I was writing Brotherhood, as you know, it takes place in a locksmith shop. So I had thought, I always end up thinking I need to dig really deep into the work these people are doing or something along those lines. So I started researching how to make a lock and all this kind of stuff back in that time, which is way over the top. Nobody wants to know that. But I thought, you know, I think it would have ended up was and bringing me just closer to my characters, where I like saw the work that they had to do and, you know, how much went into it, things like that. And I didn't end up using any of it, but I did get a feel for what it would take. Like, what does a person have to be like to do that kind of work? Very detail oriented, very patient. You know, some of it is design work on the way a doorknob or something like that might work, since they worked with that as well. You know, so like it all adds to the characters. So I never really consider research as lost. And a lot of what I do for the Victorian era is I look at Victorian newspapers, for example, all primary resources. So Victorian newspapers and Victorian cookbooks. So I'm not like taking anybody else's word for it. I'm really going to the era itself and seeing what they wrote. I'm looking at Victorian magazines for women to see what was expected of them. That's its own podcast. So there's just a lot to take from that. I have a big, I don't think I have it right here, but it's a big collection of, it's slipping my mind which magazine it is, but it's a very popular magazine that was during the Victorian era, and it's just got issue after issue after issue in a hardback. So, you know, and it's the original one. Somebody hardbacked it for whatever reason, and I have that, and boy, does it have the details on like calling cards and how to do it this season and like all that kind of stuff. So that's fun. Well, it's fun for me. And then in terms of the psychology that you mentioned, you know, whatever I have to research along the way, I research, of course. But besides that, I do read a lot of biographies. And for me, that is psychological research. I will read somebody's autobiography, mostly old movie stars because they're long gone and we have a lot of alternative views of their life. So we have their view and their autobiography, or multiple autobiographies sometimes, like Betty Davis has multiple autobiographies. So does Joan Crawford, two of my favorite people to research for psychology. Then you look at their biographies, then you look at some of their publicity. You start to draw an actual picture of what they were like. It's not going to be what's in the autobiography. Some of it will be, and you can pick up some really good points about their life, what they went through, how they felt, all of that. And then you see how they're spinning it to benefit themselves or to give a certain type of impression based on other sources, and seeing how other people told the same stories, for example, from multiple angles. And you start to really bring those things together, and it gives you a really strong sense of psychology, self-protection, self-sabotage, all that kind of stuff that we're all familiar with within ourselves, but we might not know how it works for other people as well. So, you know, of course I research psychology, you know, from other resources, but that's like digging your fingers in, you know, because it's a real person's life.
Yeah, wow. That's fascinating. I myself am not a researcher, and
Mhm.
I would probably just stop after about 5 minutes, but it sounds like you don't do that, you know, like you really dive into it. And I want to share,
Yeah.
you know, Verpy here, she said, you know, great interview. I seldom read novels, but just got myself a Kindle copy of The Anatomy of a Darkened Heart. Looking forward to reading the dark and twisted tale that you spoke about, Christie. So awesome. I
Thank
love
you.
it. I invited her to come up on the stage to ask you any questions if she'd like to. I'm not sure if she's still tuning in, but Verpy, if you are, go check your voicemail. Your Facebook message there if you're wanting to come on. And this is fascinating to me because again, you know, this is not my genre, not my preferred genre, because I don't like to go into the dark places anymore. I spent too many years there. But you have, just like what Verpy said, you know, hearing you speak about it, it's different because we're talking to the actual author, right? The actual writer who's telling us more detail about it than just picking up the book and reading the back jacket or something. And
Mhm.
so this actually intrigues me, that I may just go purchase a copy. Yeah, I'm going to purchase a copy of it and read it and just see what it's all about, and look at it from a different perspective. And that's what I love that you shared with us, is that it's, it can be either a story, or you can, pick up something from it. And like you said, you're hoping that, your message, especially going to those who are living in these dark environments right now, that you're encouraging them to get out, get
Yeah.
out. And like you said, it's not as easy as it sounds. It's not just get out, but really knowing the people to reach out to that can help you to get out. And I think that oftentimes is something that, some of us are too scared to do. And I believe that was my mom's challenge. She just didn't know who could help her, and she didn't know how to ask for help. But if you're reading the stories and you're getting that, like, wow, this is so my situation. I need to get out of this, find out who can help you to get out of that situation. So I'd love to know, Christie, what is some advice that you give for our readers, whether they're readers or writers? Like, if let's say there's something, because I heard a statistic, and statistics, I don't know if I believe them all, because who knows who even takes the statistic and who actually participates in this statistic. But I heard a statistic that there's about 95% of people who write a story never publish their book. And I also heard that something like 85% of people will never even write a story, something like these numbers, right? So I'm curious, like, what's your advice to somebody who has an idea, like, I want to write something, but they're thinking that, but I'm not a writer. I don't know how to write. What's some advice you would give to that person?
I would say, first of all, one of the things that I find, or I used to find, was that, a lot of people talk about the fear of the blank page, and it's not always fear. It can be anxiety. It can be just uncertainty. Like you said, like, if I don't know how to write, should I be doing this? Yes, you should. And there's nothing that can stop you. There's nothing that should stop you. I feel like, especially because of social media, we're always, looking at other people's lives and sort of commenting on them and stuff like that. It feels almost sometimes, when you're sitting down to write at the beginning, almost as if somebody's watching you at all times and they can see what you're doing and they're going to laugh at you or something like that. That's not uncommon. That's extremely common. And it's not a big deal. Like I said, it happens to everyone. And I used to feel that way too. I used to have an extremely strong tendency, to the point of being debilitating in terms of writing. So it's in a similar way, where I would be like, I can't write anything unless it's going to be perfect, which is so ridiculous and probably sounds crazy, but that's just how I felt. And I had to kind of bust through that. And it is a bit of just muscling through it in a way, where you're just sitting down and you're taking a notebook that you love, or maybe you're writing on the computer, whatever is comfortable for you, whatever makes you feel inspired or happy or whatever, excited, and just start writing, even if it's garbage. Like, acknowledge it's garbage. You can do that. You can sit down and say, this is terrible. I'm going to write it anyway. Here I go, and just get going. You don't have to do a good job. And one of the things that helped me, I'm not sure, I don't think I have this notebook right now. No, I don't have this notebook right now, but I have this notebook for the Dark Victoriana Collection in particular. And one of the things that I did that helped me a lot was writing, first of all, physically writing in a notebook, getting a beautiful one that I can show you that kind of stuff here. Like, I have, pretty stuff, which is funny because I write
That is pretty.
But there's a lot of really, really pretty stuff out there. So get something you like, and then something you feel comfortable with and excited about. And don't be afraid to scratch out things, to print out pictures and put them in, to write sideways in your notebook. This is stuff sounds like no big deal, but actually, when you're struggling with feeling like you're not good enough, what you're writing isn't good enough, you're afraid, anxiety, anything like that, it can actually make a huge, huge difference. And I did that a lot with that other notebook. I don't know if I really have that kind of thing in here. I think by that time I was already just writing, but it really helps break you of that feeling of it has to be right, it has to be good enough, it has to be perfect. If you're just feeling free enough to scratch things out, just cross them right out. You can use different colors, and I found that, like, putting some pictures in there for, like, my own personal Pinterest that nobody is seeing almost, was really helpful. I would sometimes write in marker and sometimes in pencil, sometimes and pen, just to kind of keep it different and prove to myself that this is scratch paper. I'm doing whatever I need to get my creativity out. It's not a big deal. Same thing as with drawing. You know, if you are so afraid of making a mistake and it being imperfect, you're never going to draw. You need to know that the eraser is there and you can always make a change. And this isn't the final version. Draft 2 doesn't have to be the final version. You're ready when you're ready with a final version. So that is what I would recommend, you know, just really being unafraid. I know there are those journals out there. It's not quite the same, but they're called something like Wreck This Journal. And you do all kinds of crazy stuff to the journal. It's kind of like that, you know, you're making a little bit of either a mess of it or like a homey place for yourself where you feel comfortable, and you know that it doesn't matter if you make a mistake. It doesn't matter if you write something wrong. It doesn't matter if you write something stupid, which there is no such thing. Really, there isn't such a thing. And sometimes you have to write scenes. If you're writing fiction or even nonfiction, you have to write a chapter, get it out of your system, and you figure out it doesn't work. It's not going to fit in the book, the final product. That's okay. You got it out of your system. You got more creativity down on the page. That is more experience. So really there is no negative side, and you'll kind of see that quicker and quicker as you allow yourself to make mistakes and to just mess around with this notebook however you feel comfortable. That would be my biggest piece of advice.
I love that because, yeah, perfectionism, I don't even know if it's a real thing. You know, you can do some things perfect, but not everything. I think it's impossible to do everything perfectly. And just like you said, to get it down, and even if you write it and after you're done writing it and you're like, oh, that just isn't going to fit anywhere, that's okay. Like you said, what did you learn from that? You broke through a block maybe that you were having, but just putting something on the paper, because you can edit it. You can hire somebody else to edit it for you. Mm-hmm. You don't have to say, I got to get it perfect the first time. I'm in an anthology book right now where we're writing 13 different books. So I have 13 chapters to write. And today I sat down and I wrote my chapter, and I wrote it in an hour, which was awesome. I was really proud of myself. Like, okay, I'm just going to sit down and write this. And I was inspired. And so I wrote in an hour, but I have a lot of crossing out. I have a lot of circling and arrows, pointing to different areas, just so I remember where I really wanted to put those things. But like you said, and I'm tactile, so I do handwrite instead of using my computer for things like this. And it just flowed. And sometimes that doesn't happen. Most of the times that doesn't happen. I have to get inspired by something or another. And like you said, even if you write it down and you're like, oh, that's stupid. Nothing is stupid, because whatever is flowing from your mind there was a reason for that to flow through your mind. So I love this. This is fantastic. And we're talking to Christie Stratos, and she has her 2 books out right now that we're talking about today. Was Anatomy of a Darkened Heart and Brotherhood of Secrets. Go check them both out. They're both different styles, different topics and stuff. One of them is regarding cults, and the other one was regarding, I got so stuck on the cult one that I don't even remember what the other one was about. So what was the other one about?
That was more family. That one has some amount of abuse in it. I don't think it requires a trigger warning, but it does include difficult family situations.
Yeah, so go check them out. Go to ChristieStratos.com. It's ChristieStratos.com. Go check her out. She also has a Patreon page. I put a link to that down below. So if you want to, give her some love over there, go to her Patreon. And then Christie, if there's anybody that wants to have you on their show, are you open to that?
Oh, absolutely. I love doing shows like this. Yours is fantastic. I'm really having a great time. And you can contact me through my website or any social media you want.
Yeah, so I do have a lot of friends that have shows out there. So anybody interested, she might have to send you through her publicist, but at least reach out to her to make that first connection. And Christie, thanks so much for being here and for sharing with me, a different perspective on the dark tales, because this was not a perspective I had ever thought of, because I just saw dark tales and I always just ran the other way. So, so you gave me a different perspective. I'm excited. I'm going to get the one on the cults, because that one is very, very fascinating to me, because like I said, I have some friends who have escaped cults, and I joined a business cult at age 51. And so you just never know when you're going to get into that kind of situation, because they're very charismatic, and they know how to get you in under their clutches, and you don't even know what's happening until one day you're like, what am I doing? And so you make
Yeah.
a decision. Are you going to leave? Are you going to stay? You get to decide. Are you going to change your life or are you not going to change your life? And that's the thing I love about it. So I'm looking forward to checking that out about the one about the cults, especially.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that's the
Thank-
one for you. I think you'll enjoy
yeah,
it.
I think so too. I think so too. I'll be like, yeah, I got out of that. I got out.
Yeah,
I escaped. But
right.
thank you so much for being here. And guys, go to ChristieStratos.com. If you enjoyed this interview, please share it out. Invite other people to also read Christie's books, and then get in contact with Christie if you'd like to have her on your show. Let's help her to get the word out about her books that she's writing. And there's many, many more to come. I have a feeling she is not stopping anytime
Absolutely.
soon.
You're dead right there.
Have a great day, everybody. See you
Thank
soon.
you.